Look, I've heard some of the best investors that I've gotten to know over time say that if the business isn't confusing when you describe it, it's probably not innovative.
Look, this is what I think we're going to do. And having that sort of brave boldness and decisiveness to go for it, that I imagine even if you're not making the same calls again, that muscle is stronger.
My guess is when you made that good call at the last company, your first gut wasn't the thing you just naturally went with. You really thought it through and made it. Yes, you have good judgment, but don't stop making judgment. Don't just go with the knee jerk. When this happens, do this. It's the only recommendation that I could guarantee to give people was never live above the second floor, because there will be a moment where you think you're going to jump out. So at least make it, if you're going to jump out the window, just break your ankle. Right? If that's the worst going to get, because the highs are so high and the lows are so low and they're right next to each other. Hey.
How you doing?
So good to see you. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm doing this from the Four Seasons. I hope you don't mind.
That's fancy. I feel like I should.
Well, I had a breakfast. I had a breakfast meeting, and I ran, and there's no way I was going to be able to do both. But by the way, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, so nice to meet you too. So by the way, the way we do, I'm already recording. We're already in it. So we just say hi. We don't do a little. I'm gonna, or whatever. We just chat. So thanks so much for agreeing to come on. I'm super curious to hear I was looking through your background and going to hear about your journey. I'll give you a little bit of background on what I love out of these conversations is I listen to so many podcasts. I love Diary of a CEO and Rich Roll, and I love sort of those kind of conversations. A lot of times I feel like it happens with people that have reached the pinnacle. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger and it's Elon, but what's really interesting to me is as I started my business last year, in the first couple of months, the idea of 0 to 1 is great, but the is what I felt like, which is like, what is one? And this journey is so sort of gray and confusing and foggy, and so what I love doing is talking to entrepreneurs and founders about the really early days of kind of where they came from and what sort of either led down that journey of wanting to get into founding something or entrepreneurship, or and then kind of what the early days of that journey looked like.
It's awesome. I love it.
Where are you from originally?
I grew up outside of New York City in a town called Chappaqua. It's in Westchester. Are you East Coast or West Coast?
I'm East Coast. I'm from Atlanta originally. Lived in New York for about 4 years, but we're back in Atlanta now. So
Atlanta's great. The only thing I don't like is the highway from the airport to Atlanta. That's the only thing I hate more than anything else. Anything great airport
around that period.
Atlanta City's great, but that highway is just murder.
It is. I'm only I think 12 miles from the office, and it can take somewhere between 26 and 48 minutes. It just depends. Like it could take you an hour. Who knows? So I know we're notorious for our traffic.
It's impressive.
So you grew up around that area. Were you there? Were you there up until sort of school?
Yeah, so I stayed in New York. I went to Pennsylvania for university, and then I came back to New York City where I did my law degree, and then I've worked predominantly outside in New York for most of my life.
Nice. And I saw something. I think it might have been on your LinkedIn, but spending time trying not to do law, or like what was the sort of choice and then the realization when you went to school and then dug into law?
Yeah, you might be one of the few people actually read because there's a lot of hidden jokes in there that I do, because I think LinkedIn's it's the Instagram version of your professional career. Nothing's really real. So we put I put a lot of stuff in there to see who reads it, as opposed to what's out there. So for example, you'll probably see I have like 15 languages that I speak. I don't know if you noticed that. I highly recommend for anyone who hasn't read my bio to look at my languages, and you'll find them particularly funny. But yeah, so I've lived in New York my whole life. I love New York. I think New York is a great place to start companies. I think Atlanta's a great place to start businesses because you can have original ideas and you don't have to be in an echo chamber. You can actually have the freedom to come up with something new and creative and innovative. And I think that's really important today, especially I'm here in the Valley right now. And the Valley's amazing, but it's a very much an echo chamber of the exact moment and the exact time. And I think that it's hard to find really creative businesses anymore because they are in an echo chamber.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. I think even as we started fundraising, for Stacklist and what we're building, it is an amalgam of a few different things that exist out there, plus a bit of a new paradigm, and that always kind of goes over. You always kind of hear that you want somebody to say, just tell me the Uber of X. And if you can't do that, then you clearly don't know your business. Then it's like, wait, hold on. Give me a little bit long. I want to sort of show you this 3D space. So I agree. There are definitely benefits of kind of being out of the same conversations.
Look, I've heard some of the best investors that I've gotten to know over time say that if the business isn't confusing when you describe it, it's probably not innovative.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. So take me through, going to school, and then what was the in your background? Did it come from uh, parents, family, upbringing, or was it sort of the way you're built when you think about the sort of entrepreneurial and taking the road less traveled?
Yeah, so I work along with my sister. I think one, we came from a very entrepreneurial family. Our father and mother started more in the real estate side of the world. My father passed away when we were very young, and so Heidi and I have worked together our whole lives. And it's the only thing I think we did to rebel was both Heidi and I went to law school. I never practiced. I hated law school. I did it in 2 years. I passed the bar. I got sworn in, and 15 minutes later, I retired. That gives you a sense of how much I hated it. And it would have been 5 minutes had they not argued with me at the bar association when I was turning in my retirement form, because you have to actually tell them you're retiring. It's a requirement,
Oh my gosh.
and I've been retired ever since. I have zero interest in doing it. Although I didn't start off purely with the goal of entrepreneurship, although I did it throughout college, I did it throughout what's called law school. I was doing other little side hustles to keep my mind occupied. But I ended up there was a period of time where I thought I was going to go be a diplomat. I worked for the State Department under Albright at USUN, and then I hated the UN, so I ended up going to I got recruited to a think tank at Columbia Business School, and that's actually where the journey began. I recruited almost everyone who was a part of the Advent Lab, which was an NSF-funded lab, and Heidi, my sister, and we started LinkShare. And LinkShare, was like your business. It was not in the norm. Affiliate marketing did not exist. And we ended up getting all the patents in the area. We ended up building a business and ended up selling it to Rakuten in 2006 for about 500 million. So it was a good
That's
exit.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
10
what
painful
was
years.
but I'm sure lots of learning. Um, it's funny. I think about when you immediately retired, you sure did get a good foundation for contract review when you started the companies, which is which is good. Um, well, that's amazing. What was the impetus like? What was it like, sort of leading up to LinkShare in terms of that little inkling, where the discussions that you and Heidi had, or and then sort of incorporating and sort of starting that path.
Yeah, so Heidi had worked in the cable industry after law school for a guy named John Malone, and we were looking at the rise of the internet early on. I'd grown up a dumpster diver, hacker, doing all that stuff, and we were just watching the growth of the internet, and from the early days. And Heidi was the same, and we were watching this medium, and everyone kept saying sort of the medium would be successful because of advertising, and we just couldn't get our arms around this one-to-one mapping of if advertising worked for television, if advertising worked for magazines, if advertising worked for billboards, why wouldn't it work here? And the answer, of course, was, well, when you're watching a commercial on TV and a Big Mac pops up, you don't leave the station and get a Big Mac, right? You are retained because you want to watch the remainder of Seinfeld or Friends or whatever else is there. And so while it has a brand impression on your brain, you don't actually leave the program. And that's partly because it's time based at that time. So you had to sit there. Same way that your magazine was time based. You know, whatever the information was at the date of publication was all you were going to get. And same thing with newspapers, et cetera. And so we looked and said, okay, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You have advertisers who are spending their money to find a way to get a user now to leave on the internet and
Mhm.
visit them and stay with them. And then you've got the person who had that customer who has to decide, I have to give up some of these people to make money, but I only make money if I have millions of these people. So I've got to find a way to retain them. And we just felt that that struggle is a struggle you see to this day, right? I mean, you can see it in every advertising based site, which is they bombard you and ruin your experience because they need to make money. So they're trying to find every place they can put it. But at the same time, they know enough of you have to leave, but they hopefully will find a way to, you know, keep you to stay, come back, and et cetera. And we just knew that was a tension that couldn't survive. Most people don't know this, but the cable industry had originally been saved by the Ginsu knife. I don't know if you remember the Ginsu knife.
Oh, wow. Yeah, totally.
It cuts through cans, it cuts through, you know,
Yeah.
pipe, and it's still sharp enough to cut through an onion. And what they don't realize was when the cable industry began, it was originally just a antenna service. If you lived in a valley, which a lot of people did because most of the towns were built in valleys, the mountains blocked the signal from TV. So you couldn't get CBS, NBC, and, you know, the three stations
Mhm.
that were out there. So originally what they would do is they would put an antenna at the top of a mountain and then they'd run cable to your house so you could watch TV. But the coax cable had lots of extra capacity, but it was really expensive to run this cable. So they started rolling out other programming. First was a clock, literally a camera watching a clock. So you could see that. And then what happened was they started saying, okay, we're going to buy content. And I don't know if you remember Ted Turner, but he bought Turner
Yeah.
Broadcasting, and they started buying up inventory to try to create new channels. Well,
It was
the
the
problem was,
original App Store.
yeah, it was the original App Store. The problem was, though, that all the advertisers were very happy with three channels. Why would they go somewhere else? And so you had to spend a huge amount of money to get content and you had to fill every minute. Otherwise, people would stop watching, but no advertiser wanted to pay for it. And so they were in this big dilemma of what do we do? And this guy came along with his Ginsu knife and said, look, what if I create a commercial that's 30 minutes? And in their head, they were like, 30-minute commercial? You got to be kidding me. And they're like, well, how are you going to pay for it? And he's like, I'll pay for it by a cable area. They call it an MSO, which is your cable operator. And they would say, look, I'll give an 800 number per MSO. So when they call, I'll have them act as a neutral party, and whatever they buy, we'll give you a percentage of the sale. And they were like, well, hell, one, I'm not gonna have to buy content for 30 minutes because you're gonna make it. And two, I might actually make some money. That's a double win. Why wouldn't I do that? And that was the beginning of
Yeah.
things like QVC and home shopping when they started to realize that shopping could be content and they could make money off of it. And so this is where you sort of saw the rise of some of like Barry Dillers and et cetera, where they started to realize what went from 1 hour of TV content to buy your Diamond L earrings to, 24 hours. They started making more money from these than anything else. And it paid for the cable industry. And so that history helped us realize that, you know what, actually, what if I got paid to have someone leave as opposed to paid to try to keep them to stay? And
Right.
that was the beginning of LinkShare. Today, millions of affiliates make their money from affiliate marketing. It is the dominant way that people make money, whether you're a content creator, an influencer, or you just have a website or a blog. You can literally make more money from those affiliate ads, and you have complete control over your business. And we love that business. That's the
That's
history
amazing.
of how it got
I
started.
yeah. That's so great. How did you get into like what was the beachhead? What was the like? How did you get into the space?
Yeah, so we were there so early that e-commerce was just getting set up. Most people were trying to figure out how to build things like shopping carts, et cetera. And I think in our opinion, if you're going to create a network effects model, which is the types of businesses we tend to focus on, you have to be there at an inflection of a transformation from one way people operated to another. And during that time frame, you get a very small window. Like think about all the social networks. They all occurred in a very small window of time, and then nothing since, right? And now you saw like now you've got the TikToks again and the Be Reals and all this. There's like all these like moments where like they come up, and that's not happenstance. There's a disruption that's taking place in the way people currently operate. And that's when LinkShare started. So we would go out to a lot of these retailers who really had nothing going on at that time. And they were so small, even in the big companies like Barnes and Noble or whatnot, they had such small teams with no budgets. And we would say to them, look, you can either spend money on advertising and hope to get people over to you, but that's really expensive because you have to buy it from Yahoo and a few of these top websites. Or there's millions of other websites that can't earn a penny. Why not just let them sell your products on behalf of it? And we'll make it all possible. And we built this system. And we would go to the first retailers and we would say to them, why not use this? And the first ones were like, well, how many affiliates do you have? And we're like, well, after you, we'll start adding affiliates and that'll come afterwards. And they would be like, call me when you have a lot of affiliates. The direct marketers were the ones who really got the business first because they were like, okay, I'm familiar with this model. Why wouldn't I do this? And so people like Omaha Steaks, and I remember Stephanie Healy was the person over there, and Todd Simon over at Omaha Steaks were fantastic. The 800 Flowers people were fantastic.
Hmm.
And so they took a risk on us early on and signed up. And eventually, what ended up happening was Michael Dell, which was the number one e-commerce company in the world,
Yeah.
called me on a Sunday night out of the blue, just called the phone number that we had listed on the website and said, I saw you on this company called Siberian Outpost, who we had fought hard to win, and said, this looks really interesting. What are you doing? Explain it to me. And I would like to say, as most founders would like to say, that that was a great moment for them. It was a bad moment because he called me on a Sunday night, and I thought it was one of my friends pranking me because he knew that I was working like a dog. And so for the first 30 minutes, I was the most sarcastic bastard you could ever hear until he started asking really hard technical questions that I knew that none of my friends could ask. And then he was very gracious and fantastic. And is still one of my favorite people in the world. And he invited me to come in next week, and that began the partnership with Dell that helped propel the company to what it became.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love those stories. Um, I remember that period. I mean, that was definitely the period too. Everyone's, do you put credit cards in online? They're just
Will they
people
be
that are
safe?
stealing your information. And yeah, exactly. It's just a bunch of hackers and ne'er do wells. Like it just kind of felt like, and then we sort of moved on. But um, yeah, I love that. I love that. What was the trajectory once you sort of started through some of those hard fought, partnerships and then working with Dell, from a growth perspective where you sort of started with that early team and then beyond.
Look, I'm a believer that every overnight success is 10 years in the making. It was 4 years of pain. I mean,
Mhm.
if we had a hard drive fail, I was diving in a dumpster outside our data center to try to find it. We had spent all of our savings. We were living in an apartment together. All the founders were, we had two main machines that we could work on. So we would rotate 12 hours on, 12 hours off to swap. My main server was the server. So I was working on the machine that was the main server. We just didn't have a lot of money back then. And there was no real venture capital going to anything but, software. And so we struggled. I remember our pitch book. We had two versions of it. The first was, what is the internet, why it will be a big deal, and why people will shop. And that was the first hour. We didn't even talk about LinkShare. If they liked that and they wanted us to come back, we talked about LinkShare.
Oh my gosh, that's like the double sell. Like first you got to sell what blockchain is before you try and sell your coin. Like, oh my gosh, I'm sure that was uphill battle in a lot of rooms.
It was brutal. And I think it really was the fact that our network started to really grow on its own that got attraction from investors because, by the time we finally raised money, which was probably 99, the market was already hot. We had a competitor who raised money very early on and raised a lot of money. But we were growing really fast in terms of affiliates, but not revenue. Just to be clear, we were not growing. We didn't grow revenue really until year 6, year 7, year 8. And people think that's crazy, but we would charge 2% of the sale. So if someone had a $50 sale, it's not a lot of money when you get 2% of it. You had a lot of deals flowing through, when it took off, it had that hockey stick like curve, but it took a while for us to do that. And fortunately, we had a great team, really great founders who all stuck together and buckled down during the tough years of 2000, 2001, 2002, and just really bare knuckled through it. And then it
What
was
was
a
that
huge
moment
success.
when or how did it play out with Rakuten? Like when they sort of came along and you started thinking about giving up the thing that you had built for 10 years?
I mean, look, first thing I'll say before we get to Rakuten is like, why do we even start the sale process?
Mm,
And look, I will say this to all the listeners who might be founders like you, which is this stuff is shit all the time. I mean, there's nothing like there's no joy. Like I think everyone makes it like this stuff is so fun. You are dealing with everyone doesn't get along with what you're saying. No one sees your vision. You battle forever. You have employees who don't understand it. They don't work the way you do. They think you're working too hard, and sometimes they don't know why. And as a founder, you're trying to manage that as best as you can, and really you do your best and you try to do it, but in reality it's more shit than good. And so eventually as the thing starts scaling up, you start seeing the vision coming to fruition, and that's the moment where you don't want to give up. In our case, we ended up being in a process of going IPO, and what had happened was one of Heidi's mentors, a guy named Dick Parsons, who was CEO of and chairman of AOL Time Warner, who had bought a whole bunch of other assets, turned to Heidi and said, "Hey, Heidi, if you're going IPO, at least let our team have a look at this." And that led to about 11 bidders coming in as soon as they heard that one person was looking at the deal.
wow.
And it was an all cash deal. We really look, Rakuten's run by a guy named Hiroshi Mikitani, who's a wonderful founder, great guy, super smart. And I think what makes it a lot easier to have your baby continue to operate is when you know you've got another great founder who cares about being successful. And he has built a wonderful business around the globe. And that is very much an indication of how good he is as a founder. And we were very happy to be a part of that organization.
That's amazing. Wow, what a journey.
Yeah.
Um, did you take time off? Did you let it did you settle and decompress?
Look, I will, every founder here dreams of the day that they don't have to work. And then when that day comes, you climb walls. You think that you can turn it off. But the training that happens in those first 2, 3 years of always worrying about what's going to happen next, trying to build for the future, thinking about the things that could be risks, making sure you're executing well, thinking about the next people that are going to join the team, they're going to help you. That doesn't go away. And you think you can sit by a pool, you think you can stare off. Your brain is on such overdrive, and your ability to digest information, critically think it about what it means, think about what it's going to be next. When that's gone, you really don't have the ability to get back into a normal life. And so you find things to fill that day. So I don't know. Have you had that time off where you thought, oh, I'm going to enjoy this?
No, I usually for me, like it depends on where I'm going, but I may have 1 to 2 days where I sleep a lot, I eat a little bit, I watch Netflix like this, and I just let sort of the current stresses. But what happens is when that brain space sort of fills up or eases up, and then there's not pressure, then immediately you start, oh, I've got an idea. You know what we could do is like, and then it starts sort of filling back up with new, fresh ideas. So I know how hard that is. I'm always the one that as soon as I start to decompress, then I start to want to crank because I have fresh brain space now.
And this is what happens. You end up starting to dig in and as if it's a full-time job about some new technology, some new trend, some new thing that you want to learn about. And it becomes the same obsession that you had with your business, but without the support staff, without the
Hmm.
goal at the end of the day. And knowledge is an amazing thing to acquire, but when it's not used, it's wasted. And so you end up starting to play with ideas, think about things, start pushing other ideas. And the thing about founders I think are so great is they push each other. So whatever idea you think you have, no matter how good it is, they'll poke holes in it. They'll find questions that they don't buy that will upset you, but then you'll think back on it. And you'll be like, you know, were they wrong? And you'll keep thinking about how do I refine this? How do I make it better? And that's really what ends up happening. And before you know it, you find yourself back in the game and so happy you did and angry that you did at the exact same time. And that's the
Yeah,
life of a
no,
founder.
totally. But now you have new tools and new experiences from what you did before that I'm sure have to feel fun to kind of go further faster with the things that you don't repeat before you start getting back into new learnings.
It's funny you say that. During that period of time when I was trying to think about the next thing we were going to do, and Heidi and I were sitting around with Tad, and we were all trying to figure out what are we going to do. This very famous founder, I won't use his name, turned to me and said, "Look, he's like, you're right now. You're feeling really good because you had a great win, and you've learned that you can do things you didn't think you could do, and you've learned a lot of skills that are going to help you and save you time. But I have to tell you, there's very few universal truths in time." And I don't think I understood what he meant by that. And what I've learned is that the learnings that you had that
Mm,
helped you form good judgments were right for that time with that business with those problems, but they're not universal. In other words, just because I've learned a skill that I think will help me doesn't mean it will apply to the situation that you think it will help you with.
true. I would say though that one of the hardest things, especially for a first time founder, is trying to get good at listening to your gut, whether that is, experience or even just being tapped in to just like, look, this is what I think we're going to do. And having that sort of brave boldness and decisiveness to go for it. That I imagine, even if you're not making the same calls again, that muscle is stronger because you just did it a bunch of times and got and sort of had this and so I do imagine though that you feel more confident like when you start making those second calls again.
So let me give you the counterpoint, which I think is what he was making to me, because I agree. You don't second guess yourself as much because you at least have confidence enough that you've made good calls in the past. But part of the reason why you made those good calls was your insecurity around, am I making a good call? When you get to the place where you're like, I make good calls, are you doing that same thought process that went into the first time when you made a good call? Or are you just going with your first gut? Because my guess is when you made that good call at the last company, your first gut wasn't the thing you just naturally went with. You really thought it through and made it. And that's not a bad thing. And so what I believe to this day this person was trying to tell me was, yes, you have good judgment, but don't stop making judgment. Don't just go with the knee
Yeah.
jerk. When this happens, do this. When this person says this, do this, because it's very easy to fall into it. I made this call last time and now it's time to get rid of, now I'm going to do the same thing. And I'll give an example of that. I've heard many people say things like, I've never regretted firing someone too quickly when it turned out not to be right. Well, yeah, but you also forget you've also sometimes made mistakes on firing people.
Right.
When you
Yeah.
needed them and the hindsight, and maybe you didn't realize it, or maybe they had said something right. You're remembering because of our natural biases. Cognitive dissonance means we only remember the times things worked out, right? And we forget the things when things went wrong. So you end up almost overconfident making decisions that you had spent time thinking about that led to you making good decisions. And that's why you believed in them. But you very quickly can stop doing that. And the industry really wants you to make fast decisions, but sometimes you do actually need to have critical thought. You have to think it through, and you can't just take a decision that worked really well in my last company and assume it's automatically going to work well here.
I like that. I like that through the lens of I imagine, you know, you hear even people like Meryl Streep saying that she gets incredibly nervous before every performance or whatever it is, that the anxiety and the second guessing that you had as an early founder that made you sort of analyze everything, whether it be, you know, fast, but sort of look at everything. What you didn't have, which you will have later, that you have to be wary of, is the I am a person who makes good decisions,
Yeah.
because then that overshadows then all of that sort of processing that you used to be doing.
Look, I think you have shown that you can make good decisions, but you did it through a process of testing, thinking about it, really asking
Hmm.
people. But when you get rid of that and all you remember is I made good decisions, you stop doing the thing that made you make good decisions. And I think that's so easy to forget. And I watch that with a lot of second time founders and or people who've started having success either early on where the thing just took off and they did well, they think, oh my God, I'm such a great thinker. And you can see there's no critical thinking there. They're just really going with the I must be a great decision maker. And luck, as as someone else told me once, luck is about surviving long enough for it to find your door.
Yeah.
And sometimes it finds your door quickly. More often than not, it doesn't. And so I think those are the lessons we try to learn as we can.
Yeah. I love that. What was so where did the path take you after Rakuten, and what was that gap between the next
It was about
venture?
a year, and then what we just started doing is we just started playing with different technologies and different ideas and doing a lot of investing. So, we invested in everything from satellite companies, and I still sit on the board of Spire Globe, a cube satellite company that we helped early on, um, to every kind of idea you can imagine, because I literally traveled around the globe meeting entrepreneurs to hear what they were thinking about. And you are, as a founder, you're always looking for the people on the fringe. They're playing with something so new that everyone thinks that they don't understand, they don't get it. And you're just trying to find a fit with a community that you like, with a problem that you think will be meaningful enough to spend time of your life on, and where you're willing to really invest yourself into that category. And I think that's what ended up happening for about a year, and then we started just experimenting for probably about 5 years with different ideas and different technologies and different problem sets before we inevitably ended up on Collective Eye.
That's great. And so what was the genesis or the spark that you started to dive into Collective Eye?
So Collective Eye is just short for collective intelligence, and our theory was that neural nets were going to be a really big deal. And having been a fan of Minsky for years, having been someone who played with expert systems for far too long, I started having a lot of friends in that area that were going to DeepMind, and they were really coming back to us. Well, that Google Brain, at that time, they were coming back and saying that you have to come back. This stuff is real, like it's actually working now. And the more we dug into it, the more we thought it was really interesting. But we couldn't get our arms around the language, image, audio, video part of the market. And I think kudos to Sam Altman. He has done just a magnificent job. But we kept thinking to ourselves, this is a game of kings. It's a hard game to play. You're going up against Google, Meta, Microsoft,
Yeah.
Oracle. And these guys already have money. They have tons of talent. They have skill in this area. They've already applied AI to their business. So they already know not just theoretical, but how to apply it. They have the hardware. They have we kept thinking to ourselves is, my God, talk about advantages that they have in their favor. And we knew we'd have to raise billions of dollars, which meant heavy dilution, spending most of your time meeting capital people. And we thought to ourselves, okay, this isn't going to work. But we did think that a lot of what you could use a neural net for was not really being thought of. And today we would call them world models. So the
Hmm.
idea, for example, Jan LeCun talks about this, and Fei Li talks about this, which is there are newer types of different approaches to neural nets that help the AI learn about the world it lives in. And for us, that world was the study of how the world does business. So Adam Smith talked 300 years ago about the invisible hand.
Right.
It's 300 years later, and people are still operating in an invisible hand environment.
Yeah.
That just that strikes me as a lack of imagination. And we saw the inklings of a lot of this stuff coming up already. Take, for example, Uber. aggregating supply and demand around livery. It's a huge sector of the economy, and they were able to essentially aggregate it and then optimize it. This is why you get good cars that are clean and drivers that aren't crazy and mints and
Right.
water and all this great stuff. And you get a great price, and it really optimized an economy that eventually had been an invisible hand. There's no more invisible hand than the yellow cab driving around New York City streets waiting for someone to put their arm up.
Right. Yeah,
Which
exactly.
was, if you think about it, which was the problem before, which is they didn't know where to go, so they just randomly drove the streets, fighting for rides, halfway killing people trying to get to the one guy who lifted their hands up because five cars would go for
Yeah.
one. And meanwhile, there was an area of New York that were 10 people waiting for a cab that none ever showed up. And so you can see how much that has changed the environment. And we said, look, these are perfect examples of where that can take place. And that's the beginning of Collective Eye, which is we said, okay, how would we go about doing this? Where would the data set be? How would you train the model? How would you get companies to agree to give you the data? And here we are 10 years later, we track 5% of the globe's economy. We're able to make ridiculous predictions around, supply and demand, to help organizations really operate their business in a way that is not based off of guessing and polling and the kind of craziness that companies today actually still operate on. And that was the beginning of the business.
And what time period was that
This is
at the
about 10 years
beginning?
ago. Yeah, about 10 years
Okay.
ago. So it was
Right.
literally between OpenAI and DeepMind, right smack in the
Yeah.
middle. We started this business and just began researching about how do you build this kind of a neural net, and that was it. And today we have some of the most well known companies in the world who rely on the product to operate their business on a day to day basis, and we're getting to the place now where we can see economic changes as if it's a live stream of the economy.
Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah, it's
amazing.
crazy. It's why we have people like Dr. Nouriel Rubini from Dr. Doom, the famous economist. We have people like Roger Ferguson, who was vice chair of the Federal Reserve Bank. We have all these great people around the company, Hod Lipson, and I can keep going. All of which are really looking and saying, "Oh, you could study the economy as through observation, and if you can study the economy, what does that do for how the world operates?" And it is a dramatic change on how people can operate.
That's amazing. What's the journey been like over that 10 years? And second part, conversely compared to the first venture that was about the same period.
Again, it's a network effects model. So in our business, every time a company signs up, they're willing to contribute their data to make the neural net smarter and get insights back on themselves. So you can imagine what it's like when you go to the first company 10 years ago and you say, the whole benefit of this is you're going to get this collective intelligence of everyone. And they say, that's awesome. How many people do you have? And you go, well, after you,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
and
I've got
so,
one other person that I'm meeting later
yeah,
today, and
yeah,
then both
yeah.
of you.
Yeah, if I could just get the ball. And by the way, these also have to be Fortune 2000 companies because you need scale of data to train these models. And so they're thinking to themselves, okay, really? You need my data. You want to do this thing. I've never given it up before. And that was the business. And so you basically spend network effects models are, as one of my board members once said to me, he said, it's like pushing a rock up a hill that gets steeper as you go up and then eventually just tips and then it rolls down. And that's the phase we're in right now, which is now we come in with so much data that no matter who you are, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what you're doing or how big or small you are, I'm always providing you more insights than you could ever get on your own. And that becomes a competitive disadvantage if you're not there. And so now we call up people and we say, sure, it takes 45 minutes, go live, and I'll show you how little you knew about your business and how much I can have an impact on your revenue. And then we have Fortune 2000 companies that talk about, us taking them from, negative 17% growth to 44% growth in a year. Well, 44% growth for Fortune 500 is an insane,
Oh,
double digit would be insane. And so we keep
yeah.
showing all these things and that's what's sort of helping build that momentum of the rock rolling down the hill. But I would say the first 8 years were pushing it up the hill, trying to get one person, one company at a time, get on board to give us more and more data. But we were seeing the results were just getting better and better every time we launched a new customer. Everybody's results get better. We would get calls from customers saying, I like the most recent upgrade. There was no upgrade. It was just another customer that
It's-
had joined that had a
it's-
lot of data, and all of a sudden the whole thing got smarter, and they were like, "Thanks for the new version," and we were like,
right.
"Okay," and that would be it. And now today we just do these magical things. around
That's
people's
amazing.
business. It's really cool, but it's
And I
hard work.
imagine it also has. Have you seen the sort of like, the trajectory change since the sort of, was it summer? Was it July or August when ChatGPT came out, and now everybody,
Totally,
and then the models, and has that just
totally.
completely shifted? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, the hard part is AI is this generic term, and most people are used to machine learning, which was this sort of you had for those who don't know data science, basically the difference between the two is in machine learning, you'd have a data scientist, an actual human, who is supposed to know the industry you're in, and they would do something called feature selection. So they would pick like call it 20 to 250 features. And a feature would be like male, female, or whatever. It's a data element, and they would go and pick that. And then they would do something called model selection, where they would pick up amongst these different models, which model is the best one. And it's what they call a regression model, which means it's looking at the last 2, 3 years and it's saying, look, let's assume the future operates the way the last 2 to 3 years are. So imagine applying that to commerce. Let's just think of the last 6 weeks of things that have gone on. Is there a single week that hasn't had a war, an interest rate change, inflation, political change? I mean, this stuff has a real impact. And everyone just assumes it'll be fine. It'll be the average of the last 2 years. And of course, these models are always wrong. So we would come forward and say, no, 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 neural nets have millions of features. In fact, there's no human being at all. All we're doing is crafting features and letting the neural net use something called stochastic gradient descent, and would do all this work for it. And it'll do it on its own, and it'll constantly be self-correcting. And they would look at me and go, right, we've tried this stuff before. It doesn't work. And you'd be like, no, 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 you couldn't have used neural nets because you don't have enough data. And they would be like, I'm a Fortune 5, Fortune 10, whatever, and they would be like, I have more data than anyone else. Be like, yes, but that's still small data. And they would go, yeah. And the other thing we would talk to them about is how in this particular area, when you're studying the economy, in this case, let's say they're using their go-to-market, they're trying to figure out what revenue is going to come in and what products are going to get sold and how to warehouse and manufacture. And they're trying to figure out all this stuff. And we would say to them, look, the reason why you keep failing is you keep studying yourself to predict what somebody else will do. And they would look at you and go, what are you talking about? We're using the data of the buyer. And we're like, no, no, no. You're using your sales data to predict what's going on. The only way you can understand the buyer is if you're looking across all selling teams. Because then I can see the same buying group, how they make buying decisions. And I can say, for this group, this is how they buy. And for
Yeah.
this group, this is their bias. And they would look and they would go, I don't understand what you're talking about. And we would say, so you're literally doubling down on trying to look at what your sellers are doing to predict what the buyer will do and acting like every buyer is the same. And that message took a long time. Chat GPT came out and all of a sudden they were like, oh, you've been talking about this kind of thing.
Right.
And but by that point, we had now 8 years of data, and our model was starting to do things that felt very Chat GPT, right? Because everyone forgets GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3. They
Yeah.
remember 3.5. And our model started doing this crazy cool stuff. And then all of a sudden people are like, holy, how are you able to make these predictions without us at all? And you're like, at this point, you're like, it's just a model. Just go with it's AI. And we'd say that to people and we just roll with it. And that's sort of
Right.
where we've been. But yeah, I thank Sam every day.
Yeah.
I literally text
Yeah.
him
I,
almost every few weeks and I'm like, thanks.
yeah. Appreciate it.
He doesn't realize it, but we're extremely grateful. His breakthrough really helped the rest of the industry.
Yeah, definitely. What are you eyeing now as you look at the sort of near term, midterm, for collective eye?
So I think when we look at collective eye, it's a neural net model that studies how the world does business. But we're showing people that we can create new businesses on top of the exact same model. So we got to know each other, as you know, through intelligence.com. Intelligence.com was an example of an insight that came out of collective eye. So when you're studying how the economy functions, you're constantly looking at your predictions and trying to figure out why when you predicted something that closed and it didn't close. Why did that happen? And about 6 years ago, one of the vectors that we started figuring out was we would see deals that would have high odds of being won, and then they would get lost. And when we dug into those deals, we weren't wrong. But what would end up happening is somebody would call up a board member who knew someone at the CEO of the company you were selling to. They would put a phone call in saying, hey, something to the effect of, I'm on the board of this company. Really love if you could give them a second shot. And I know your team's leaning towards one area, but if it's closed, can you at least, at least I'll make sure you're taken care of. I'll make sure you get a great deal. What else can I do to help you? Or sometimes it would be the other way around, which is, hey, you do realize we buy $1 million from you and you're making this decision. I don't need to buy $1 million from you if you don't feel like we're good partners. And that was enough of a message to be like, okay, why are we buying this other customer companies stuff? They don't buy anything from me. We're going to work with you. And we would see that often enough that it would have an impact on our results. And so we built something called the connector graph. And we originally started by trying to bring in like LinkedIn data. That was junk. Everyone's connected. No one actually knows anyone. It's all about like trying to be an influencer. So everything's kind
Yeah.
of fake. And because nobody wants to be a follower because they get nothing, and influencers get, pride and joy and whatever else they get. But it was throwing off our data because everyone's connected to everyone. And so it was just meaningless data. It was noise. So what we started to do was we looked at our customer base and we said, okay, let's build a graph of who actually knows who. Let's use the AI to look and say, how do I build what's called a graph neural network? How do I really try to understand the strength of these relationships? So if I barely know you, um, and I ask you to do me a favor, we don't work together. We don't. Yeah, maybe you'll do something like that. Yeah, Steve's a good guy. I'll give him a say. But the more well we know each other, or the more we do business together, the more that has oomph. Or if I were at a really big company that could do something to help your career, okay, that's an example of something where maybe you'll do more than you could. Like if Jeff Bezos comes to you and says, hey, look, I need you to do this crazy thing for me. You don't even know Jeff. And you might be like, you know, maybe I'll do a solid for Jeff because maybe he'll remember
Sure.
and maybe there's something good that comes out of it and doesn't cost me much. Maybe I'll say, okay, I'll do this thing. And so we had to build out that kind of a graph that gave us that sense of the different kinds of vectors of relationships and how you leverage them and what do they mean for likely outcomes. So we started building that, and that one, it really worked well. But two, our customers were saying things like, look, I want to connect to my customer because I want to see if there's ways that I can help them, because I don't want to be just a transactional sale. If I'm going to differentiate myself in the sale, it can't be features and functions, because features and functions always end up becoming parity. So I better build a relationship. And that came through trade associations and conferences and all sorts of, but I don't know how I can leverage my network, and I don't know how I can help them, and they don't know how they can help me back. And the second thing was, we were sort of going through this phase during the go to market phase where everyone was bombarding everyone. They were buying these cadence tools and conversational intelligence, and all they were doing was all the customers were disappearing. They stopped answering their phones, they stopped responding to emails because they were just getting machine gunned to death. It was
Yeah.
for those who don't know what these tools are, you'll know what it is by me saying this. Hey, bringing this email to the top of your inbox. These were pre-built
Right.
things. And in fact, when we
You
studied
must
these
have
tools,
missed this, so I don't want you to like.
if
Yeah.
this isn't of
Yeah.
interest, just let me know, which is like the new one.
Right.
And in fact, these things were built. In fact, when we studied the cadences to try to understand what was going on with that, by the way, what we found was that the most common fourth email was, you probably haven't read my past three emails. So if someone built a cadence that presumes no one's reading the first three, think about how annoying that is for like the end user. So they just disappeared. And so a lot of them started asking for things like, hey, if I sell a customer, it'd be great if I could see who they know so that I could actually ask them for warm introductions to people and say, look, they're using my product. They're happy. Can you make this introduction? And this sort of became the beginning of it. But what happened was we ended up spinning intelligence.com out because we realized that at our core, there's a fundamental problem with social media that this product could solve. And I'll try to explain it to your audience in a way that I think will hit home. Can you name a place or any other thing you've done where you've invested more money than your relationships? You've invested less money in time and money. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Your house is less expensive. Your car is less expensive. Your education, you
Hmm.
spend more time building, developing, making new friends, getting to know people. Relationships are the cornerstone of how our entire society functions, and we invest more money, time, and energy into it. But when it comes time to being able to leverage it, the friction cost is so high that almost everybody would rather go onto a WhatsApp group and say, "Can you introduce me to Satya Nadella?" Is there anyone here who knows Satya Nadella? Half the time to a group of people you don't know that are just founders in the hope of saying, "Can someone get me to Microsoft Corp Dev or whatever?" And hoping that somebody you don't know will help you out and say, "I know someone." And then you have to hope that they have a decent enough relationship, because to go to your core network is so much effort that you
Totally.
can't do it. And what we
And that's
saw,
that one time. The second time you ask and the third time you ask, now also that network has started to degrade where it's like, I just keep getting requests to get introduced to people.
and you also don't know if you're helping them is going to be, if you do that introduction, are they going to burn your introduction? Because you don't know them. And so you end up in this place where this most valuable asset that we love, and frankly, I love helping people, and it's great, but I can't, they don't even know to come to me when I could help them. Because how could they possibly know everyone I know, how well I know them? And unless I tell stories like the Michael Dell story or the Jim McCann story for me, they're not going to know these things. And why should they? But I could be helpful to them. And that is also the lubrication that makes society function, is because nobody wants cold calls, but they do need to get to each other. It's why companies like Goldman Sachs exist, right? When we went to sell our company and Goldman was our banker, it was because when we knew we needed to get to certain people, like the eventual buyer, they had relationships and I didn't know who to go to. And it makes it just easier. And so you pay a huge price for these things, but we've spent all this time building it. So we asked the question, everybody was out building these software to try to help you build your network. And we said, that's ridiculous. You have a lifetime of building a network. Why can't we just bring you on to a platform where there's authenticity, where you can finally believe the data? So when you join, we give you the option, but you really should connect your email calendar. And then what happens is it builds a graph. The second thing it does is it has an AI agent that curates from that list based on this research that came out of Stanford called The Strength of Weak Ties. It curates not just the people you know really well, but it finds people that are in that secondary circle that you have connections to that are strong enough that would help you, that are have
Right.
and for what you're doing would be great for you. And what it sends is about a dozen invites a day on your behalf. Now you can do it manually. We just think that's stupid because it's AI. Let the AI do the
Hmm.
work for you. But when they come on, they now bring their connections. And what it means is anytime I need to get to someone, I can now just go to the search area, search for their name, and see not only who does this person know, but who do we have in common and how well. And so immediately I can get to exactly the person I need to get help from, and I can make the decision, do I want to reach out to them or not? Now, I may not have anyone who's direct, so I may start looking for other ways in, but now I can do that at self service. And by doing that, I still have to have a strong enough relationship. If I came to you and said I need an introduction to Satya Nadella, well, you and I are just getting to know each other. You might say, "Look, Steve, you're great. You seem like a nice guy, but I don't know you well enough to use that chip. I can only call him once a year, and I need
Right.
and that would be okay too, right? I'm making that decision. You're making that decision. But if it turns out when you're making that decision, you can see the people I know, and you say, "Oh my God, do you know Jeff Bezos? And I need to get Jeff Bezos. Let's help each other out." Yeah, now you've got parity. And think
Right.
about that versus that kind of a world versus social media where the influencer accrues all the value. Here, there's parity. Everybody has something to give, and everyone's network has something to get.
I love that. I can't tell you, especially during the fundraising period, how many times I've reached out to somebody and been like, "Hey, you're connected to so and so," and they're like, "Am I?" Or, "Yeah, I think I probably tried to connect with them, so I added them." And they probably said yes, but I don't really like. I've never really met that person. And then obviously that's just so much time wasted doing that research for something that doesn't really exist.
And the reality is, you just need to get to a person, and there is someone in your network who knows them, and you're going to find out about that 9 months later. I cannot tell you how many people told me I had to shut down my company because I couldn't raise funds because I was trying to get to this person, of a person I knew well. And you know how hard it is to either make the decision of saying nothing because you feel horrible because you could have helped them, you didn't even know,
Right.
or the fact that like you tell them and they're like, oh, I can't believe I didn't ask. And like, and what it is everyone's making this high cost trade off of, am I going to bother somebody? Because everybody knows LinkedIn's full of, I have 10,000 connections. I mean, like, I don't know 10,000 people, and so how do we get to that place where people can really leverage it? And this isn't just for business. I mean, people think it's like, oh, this is just professional. No, if I need to go to a doctor, I would like to know which of my friends actually know this doctor. Because if they tell me, yeah, I was partying with him at Burning Man and he was doing a lot of ecstasy, I might be thinking twice if I'm going to go in for surgery.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I
Yeah.
should be able to get that information at my fingertips. I should be able to call a friend up and say, how well do you know this person? I'm thinking about using him for a surgeon. And that should not be trying to decide, can I leverage something I've spent my life building? Because those people want to help me if they can. And this is the paradigm we're trying to change with it. So it's a new product though. It's got, look, we're still working on it. We've got a lot of things, but it was really designed to show that I can take all these little variables that come out of the model and you can create all these kind of businesses the way Cursor is built on top of, Claude
Hmm.
or ChatGPT. You can start building all these other businesses. And we're going to open up APIs to let people build businesses off of this world model because we think that's the way the business scales really quickly. But we also like the affiliate concept in general, which is, let everyone come and make money off of this thing. Let everyone be successful. And the faster we can create opportunities for people, the more we'll actually make the world function in the way it's more optimized and frankly better. We think if we do our job well, there shouldn't be mass layoffs. There shouldn't be shocks to the economy. There shouldn't be recessions. We should be able to figure out what's happening in the economy and be able to adjust quickly, not based on gut. And that's our hope. But
I
it's a
love
hell
it.
of a mission to try for.
This is so good. That's so good. Um, if you so looking back from what you've learned, especially the two biggest ventures that you've started and have grown, to someone early on their journey, either starting to think about diving in or sort of early on the path, what's something that you would impart to them?
Look, I'll probably say the exact same thing that probably drove you to create this, which is watching tips and tricks about how to do anything from raise business, hire people, whatever on Instagram or TikTok or all these other places or these blogs where people are telling you what to do. Don't listen to them. Find your own style. Do your own thing. You know how to build a business with integrity. You'll attract the right people. I watch all these people who try to make everything look easy, and I also watch all the time all these things about how to get venture money and from venture capitalists telling you how to do a presentation, how to do anything. And yeah, it's okay. It's good to listen to what your customer wants, but remember also they should probably be asked. There should probably be more videos of founders explaining about their experiences with venture, how not to be a shitty venture capitalist, because they are not known for picking winners. They are known for momentum plays. And I think that's the hard thing is everyone thinks they're going to come out of, you go to YC for group of disruptors. I've never seen people try to be so formulaic. You go to YC, then you get your first round. And if it's from one of the top tier firms, that'll help you get all these other things as if money has, there's only one brand that matters. There's only one top tier brand, which is the US dollar. There's no firm like there have been plenty of failures at Andreessen and Sequoia and Kleiner and whoever the firms are. And it's not that they're not great, but sometimes you pay a price for that money that's greater. We had great firm, Internet Capital Group, we had Comcast and Mitsui, and I couldn't have dreamed of better investors in my first deal, better friends. They're all investing and they've all invested in Collective Eye. They have been long-term thinkers and drivers of our business and our success. And I don't know if I would have gotten that from a top tier, even if had wanted their money, which we didn't even talk to them back then. But
Right.
I think we ended up with just great people who loved our vision and stuck through the bad years and got to the good years. And I don't know if you find that a lot today in the top VCs. They always talk about investing in their winners and dumping the losers, and that's not to me value add. That to me is like hanging on and taking credit for something you didn't really participate in.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that
exactly.
helps your audience, but I think that's probably why you began this one, which is you're trying to learn from people, not from TikToks.
Yeah.
And what I
I'm
will
trying
tell
to learn
you
by
is,
falling. You jump off the cliff, and as you're falling, one, you get comfortable with falling, and then you learn a lot on the way down instead of, standing on top and sort of reading the manual over and over again, because, it changes you wake up one morning, you're going to take over the world. By the afternoon, you're just like
you're
crushed, and then it's
spent.
back to it again. Yeah.
Like I used to
Yeah.
I used to teach a class at Columbia Business School, and one of the classes I would teach was the only recommendation I could guarantee to give people was never live above the second floor, because there will be a moment where you think you're going to jump out. So let at least make it, if you're going to jump out the window, just break your ankle. Right? That's the worst going to get, because the highs are so high and the lows are so low, and they're right next to each other. And that's the hard part about it. And for a lot of people, they don't talk about this in the industry, but it is emotionally beating on a person. This is a hard industry. I'm fortunate to work with my sister. I'm fortunate to work with my brother-in-law. And I'm fortunate to come from a family of entrepreneurs that support us and know that it's going to be hard. But I don't think a lot of people get that from TikTok. They definitely don't get it from watching. This company just raised 100 million, and did this thing, and they did it in 3 weeks with four people.
Oh
And
my
that's just
gosh.
those are the anomalies. My day was YouTube. They got bought for 1 billion, and when they were about to run out of cash, and PayPal, the same thing, and those happen, but they're not the norm. We wish for them. Trust me.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. This was amazing. This is one of the most fun conversations. I love it, and I appreciate your time and imparting your experience and your wisdom. Yeah, I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. I mean, this is what it's not easy to be building a great company as you are. And Stackless will go down and become one of the biggest companies. I know it will. But to do this on the side, which is a gift to give back to other people, is something that you should be proud of. And I hope your audience appreciates it as much as I do.
Well, I appreciate you, and here, hang around for a minute while we and we'll catch up.
Great.
Thanks.